Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Education in Focus with myself, Leigh, Lisa, and Jason. So many of our episodes have touched on conversations with school, and we thought it would be good to have a deeper look at how, as parents, you can have those conversations. Lisa and Jason will be offering their advice and guidance, but please don't forget that you can always contact us if you feel adoption support could be of some help. So without further ado, let's bring Lisa and Jason in.
Hey,
Hi,
how you
both.
doing?
Hi, Leigh.
Great. Good to see you again.
And you. So, what's the best way to have a conversation with school? How do we broach that subject? What do we do?
Well, personally, I always prefer to have the conversations face to face, if at all possible. And I feel that way both when I was a teacher and as a parent myself. So if a phone call is the only option, I'm not saying you shouldn't take it, but if at all possible, try and get a face to face meeting. But also accepting with that it will take potentially a little bit of time to organise. So I would probably email in the first instance. Anyone who has ever tried to phone a school during the school day knows it's very hard to get hold of teaching staff. So probably an email is your safest bet, or if they've got an app like Dojo or something, then you can do it via that. But yeah, just be prepared that it may take a little bit of organising.
Yeah.
It isn't possible for teaching staff, education staff in general, to be able to be flexible with the times that they are in the classroom. And so it's probably going to be after school. But also bearing in mind that education staff may have made childcare arrangements, so might have to go and pick up their own children at, say, 3:30, 4 o'clock. So it will take a little bit of time to perhaps get a point that's convenient for everyone. That makes me sound really defeatist, doesn't it?
No.
It's just the reality is that, lunch breaks aren't really an option. Teachers might be doing break duty or supporting with children at lunchtime as well. And so probably after school, but just be aware they might need to organise some things.
Yeah, I would agree. I was thinking about this as well in terms of how I was thinking about the practical sort of steps you need. But then I thought, well, tracking back a little bit, I also thought, well, this builds on actually hoping that you've built a decent relationship with the school that you're at, or your
Yeah.
children's at, because we've got, of course, got a podcast all about that sort of thing, which you might want to listen to. But it just made me think this is the time that you may, if you've got a concern, this is where you need to come withdraw from the bank that you've been investing in. If you've been investing that in effort and relationship building with the school, it's the time to sort of maybe pull from there. And it's easier to manage that, I suppose, knowing that there is already existing some trust and there's a good working relationship there. But I agree, yeah, face to face is definitely best, like Lisa was saying, because you can just get a lot more quality communication, can't you?
Yeah.
You don't misinterpret things in the same way. Emails are terrible because you can read something, someone might have meant it in one way, but you might read it in a completely different way and think it's said. But obviously, it sometimes is the only option. But I suppose if you want to go for the best, it is the face to face. There are possible. I mean, I've got some thoughts about this, but you can meet in the school day sometimes if it's quite an important issue.
Yeah.
Then, if there's time to prepare and plan it, the teachers can get cover
Yeah.
if they need to be released to actually meet you in a school day, because that means that your child's not at home, because after school can be difficult for parents too, can't it, if
Of
the children
course.
are with
Yeah.
them. So it is possible to release staff sometimes to enable them to meet you in the school day. That does happen.
But again, it's being aware of the fact that it's unlikely to happen that day or the next day. It's going to take a little bit of organisation.
Yeah, I think most of what I've thought about for this podcast is really about planned preparation kind of type meetings, things that you've decided you need to spend a bit longer, because there are obviously those informal conversations you have, and hopefully you've already done those things in terms of agreeing with the school when to have chats with them, when are they going to talk to you about things that have happened, because we've said before, haven't we? It's not always appropriate to be approached on the playground at the end of the day, told all sorts of stuff, but the child is next to you listening to this, and it can be really shaming and stressful for them. And you might not need to know every little ins and outs of the day. It's just not necessarily important, because there's nothing you can do about it. And it needs to be that clear cut-off point. So hopefully those kind of things are established, and they need to be established before this, so that when you're talking about this kind of meeting, you're thinking about something where you've got a worry or something that's bothering you, and maybe the school's asked for it, but either or. you decided that you can't just discuss this in a few minutes informally. You've got to have a sit down with some people and start thrashing out some ideas together.
How do you prepare for the meeting? What things should you be doing? I know you talked about tracking back, Jason, in terms of kind of our podcast episodes and building a relationship. But I suppose there's some element of that if we're going in because something isn't working.
I think you definitely need to make sure you don't wait for things to get worse. If it is worrying, you start just straight away let them know, because that might be a quite quick conversation and it's done. But if it may require something a bit more in depth. But often they don't fix themselves, do they? We know that if there's an issue going on, that it's quite likely it's not going to get fixed by itself. So it's best just getting there early. I suppose you just have to think to yourself, right, what kind of meeting do I want? And am I going to have to ask them to sort of get some cover in the daytime? When am I going to be able to be free? What flexibility have I got as a parent? Can I get childcare if it is an after school thing, or is it going to have to be something in the school day? That kind of thing. But you definitely need to prepare. That's one thing I think is probably something people don't always appreciate is the more prep you do as a parent, just like a member of staff should do ahead of a meeting, the better it's going to be for everybody, because what you want is a productive meeting where that you come out of it feeling like you've got some solutions.
Yeah. I mean, I recently had a school meeting like this, and I was surprised at how much preparation it did take me. And that's someone who, works within this arena and is an ex-teacher and should therefore feel quite confident having these conversations. But it still took an awful lot of preparation. And I started off with, what do I want to achieve from this meeting?
Yeah.
And I made sure I knew what I wanted. And that will vary person by person. It might be you want more support in the classroom. You might want them to understand your child a little bit better. You might, there's a whole host of things it could be. But what do you want? And then the other thing that I also had high on my list of things to think about is, what do I want them to know about my child? Um,
Yeah.
And again, that can vary. It might be how they're currently struggling. It might be the anxieties or worries that your child has. It might be that you feel that they are lacking some understanding about adoption related issues. It might be that they are lacking some understanding that is specifically related to your child's history, that would help them.
Yeah.
So working out what I want and what I wanted them to know then enabled me to think, okay, how am I going to pass that information on and steer it in the direction that I wanted? And I personally, because I am a little bit weird like this, I wrote out a little script as if I could read it out to them in the meeting. And obviously it didn't work out that way, but it had given me the opportunity to think through the kinds of phrases that I might want to use, or how I would put certain things into the right words, especially if you're thinking that they do need to understand something about your child's history. You need to perhaps really wrestle with how you phrase it, so that they can get the meaning and get the intent behind it, but not obviously sharing too much that you wouldn't be happy with them knowing. So yeah, I personally found that writing a little script out to achieve those two aims was a useful guide for me when I was actually in the meeting itself.
Write down questions as well, and don't worry about things that you think, oh, that's a silly question. There's no such thing as a silly question. If you don't know it, you don't know it, and you just need to find out. So do ask everything you want to know, because it'll help you. It'll ease your anxieties too if it's something that you're not quite sure about. I think it's quite useful if you can. Again, this depends on your child, doesn't it, and their age and the stage and so on. But speak to them ahead of the meeting. So some children, it's useful to let them know you're going to have a meeting to help them. Some children, that'll be the last thing they want to hear.
Yeah.
But so you just have to judge that the best way you can. But if it is something that's appropriate, you might want to get their views, their perspectives, if you want to clarify a few things so that you can advocate on their behalf. If that's what you're trying to do. That can really help, because the school might have some idea if they've spoken to the child as well, but they might not be aware of everything. So you may be able to offer the child's voice in a sense
Yeah.
that they can't.
Yeah, that's really important. And I think going in, being realistic, I know you said, Lisa, about going in and what do you want to achieve? What do you want that meeting to do? And I think that's great, and we should all have that in mind. I think we also, as parents, have to be realistic sometimes about what it is that school can offer,
Yeah.
and the time and the resources that they have available. So nobody's saying compromise on what your children need, but it might be that that's achieved in a way that looks a little bit different to how you'd envisaged it, maybe.
Yeah, and also I thought it might be useful, like, listening to what you were saying, I thought it might be useful to share what was number one on my list about what I wanted to achieve.
Mm.
And that was, I want us to have a good working relationship to support my daughter. And so that framed actually an awful lot of everything else. Was it enabled me to think, okay, I need to hear what they can offer,
Yeah.
as well as giving our side of it. And the focus really was on building that relationship. So yeah, being realistic is a massive part of it, because obviously for a lot of our children, and what we would hope in terms of their stability, is that they're going to be in this place for a long time.
Mm.
So we want them to be comfortable and well supported there, and we have to therefore work with the school in a positive way. So even if it's not number one on people's lists, the idea of building a relationship and working well together with the school should probably be somewhere on that list of things you want to achieve.
That's where it all rests, isn't it? And it's got to be professional. And some of this, like you were saying as well, Lee, is a bit like a negotiation, really. You're kind of coming with your demands. There's their offer. You kind of try and meet somewhere in the middle. It's a bit like that in some ways, because the reality is of what the capacity of the school is to be able to meet the needs that your child has. But quite a lot of things can be done creatively anyway. It doesn't have to be all rely on resources, let's say. So there's a lot that can be done.
Just circling back round to you saying about writing down some questions, and again, as part of the preparation, it's a good idea to note down some questions to kind of finish off the meeting with as well, such as, when should we next meet about this, or when can I
Aha.
expect to hear an update about this, or what should we do if we find this isn't working, because in the flurry of the actual meeting, especially if people do have time pressures, you might find that those things haven't been agreed. So just having them jotted down as that little reminder will hopefully mean that you end the meeting knowing what's going to happen. You know,
Mm.
some other questions might be, okay, so who's going to be taking responsibility for that? Who would be the best member of staff to talk to about that? Just little things like that to remind you to close it knowing what you need to know.
I think if you've taken all that time to organise a meeting, because this would have taken some prep,
Yeah.
and people you may have taken a bit of time out of your work if you're at work. The school would have put some cover, let's say. It's a lot of investment of time and energy. So I think building on that, you really probably need to ask for notes, minutes of some form. It doesn't have to be really formal, just a list of the actions that everyone's agreed, and then just check through them at the end. And hopefully the person leading the meeting will do this in school. But as a parent, I would just want to make sure that is happening. So can we just check what have we agreed to do, who's doing it, like you say, and then walk away with a copy of that in your hand?
Yeah.
If that's not possible, I would always say drop the email afterwards to say thank you ever so much for meeting today. We agreed that, and then you've got that copy, that record of this is what we've
Yes.
agreed.
Nothing more frustrating than having meetings where you felt, oh, that was really positive, and then it just sort of drifts along
Yeah.
and no one's quite sure what was agreed afterwards, and
Yeah.
you then become frustrated if things haven't been put into place that you felt had been agreed. That causes obviously more stress and tension that we don't need. So hopefully the school will do that, but I think it's worth asking for it anyway. It's okay to ask these meetings anyway. As an adoptive parent, you're probably more likely to have to ask for meetings like this than most parents will. So I would say for other parents, don't worry about it. Don't feel like you're being a pain or a burden. Um, Having these meetings is fine. It doesn't have to be a massive complaint or problem. It could just be something you think, I can't do this in a 5-minute conversation. That's something we need to have a discussion about, because it might be something you can anticipate that could build up to something more difficult if we don't have a conversation now. So I think you're of every right to have these conversations, and so go for it. I don't think you need to worry about it. You're not being one of those quote awkward parents. Anyway, if you have to be awkward, so what?
Should we take someone with us, or does that look like we are ganging up on school? What's your suggestion?
It depends on the situation, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Did you take anyone, Lisa? Or did you have your?
I took my husband. I couldn't stop him.
Yeah,
I mean,
so did you
I
have a
wished
husband?
he wasn't there, but I couldn't stop him from
That's
going.
another
So.
podcast episode, everybody.
I would say that if you want to, please do, because it's whatever's going to give you the most confidence, or make you feel like able to have what may be a difficult conversation. So if you want to take someone with you, then please do. The other thing is, I know sometimes these meetings occur and there's more staff there than you perhaps anticipated. So you might have anticipated meeting with a class teacher, and perhaps there's a class teacher and the teaching assistant there. And so if it helps you, then feel free to. Probably just one or two. I wouldn't suggest having an army of people. That might
God, no.
that might give the wrong message. But yeah, if you want someone, I certainly never minded meeting with more than one person at once.
No, I think it's good to let them know you want to bring someone with you, just to so the school doesn't think, oh, hang on, why have they brought this person? They might think, hang on, is there something wrong? Are they coming to quote have a go? Because schools can get nervous about that sometimes. They don't want parents to come in all guns blazing either. And so it's good to know. Yeah, there's all kinds of reasons why someone might be useful, because if you're particularly, let's say, anxious about meeting with staff and feeling a bit like there's a whole system of stuff they might be using jargon, and I don't might feel a bit like out of a depth here, even though you shouldn't do, but that might well be a feeling. And or if you're feeling quite upset about something that's going on, and you're thinking, I could get quite emotional in this meeting, because you obviously care deeply about your child. So um, and when you get to that stage of emotion, it can be quite difficult to be rational, can't it? And so that could be where you have a person just to be your support, really, for that reason. And that could be, like, say, a friend, it could be a partner. Sometimes partner's not the right person. They might be just as equally, and they might be boiling and ready to snap. And so that's not going to necessarily help lead to a productive conversation. So it might be someone who's a little more removed from the situation, perhaps one step removed, who can help you with the rational thinking. So there are, I mean, you could even have your adoption support worker if you think that's appropriate. There are other people. You can get a professional if you need to. There's people that if your child got SEND, then you can get the local special education needs service. The local authority will always have somebody. They can come to meetings, but that means it's going to take a little bit longer to try and organise, because they've got to then be available, haven't they? So it's a little bit more difficult to take a bit longer to just find a time for the meeting then. But yeah, definitely worth having somebody along with you, I think. You feel like it would help.
And any tips for the best way to manage the conversation? So any do's or don'ts?
It's quite interesting, actually, what you said, Jason, before about schools can get a bit anxious about these meetings too. And I
Yeah.
certainly recognised in this meeting that I had that both the teacher and the teaching assistant were feeling threatened initially,
Yeah.
and started off being a little bit brusque and very eager to tell me everything that they had done. And thankfully, I was able to recognize it for them feeling like they were being threatened, because it's natural, and it's human. Most people in the education environment will care about the children that they teach, and will want to do the best by them, and will want to do a good job, and sometimes can feel a little bit worried when these meetings are called, if it's been called for by a parent, because they think that they are under threat. And that might be true. You might be thinking that they are letting your child down, but actually, you're going to have a more meaningful conversation and a more useful conversation if we're working together. And so, whilst I'm not saying that you should let them off, or you should kind of do everything that you can to comfort them, that's not the goal of it. But actually, avoiding being confrontational, recognizing the emotion that they've got, I would say is really, really helpful for having a good conversation, one that's going to ultimately help the child in all of this. And that was something I hadn't prepared, actually. It was something you said, Jason. I thought, yeah, actually, it's important. Was it you catch more flies with honey? Is that the phrase?
That's a good one. Yeah. It's true. Even as a head, I'd have those nervous feelings about a parent who was coming to meet with me. We'd agreed to meet, and because you never quite know what's going to happen, you think it could be difficult, because if they start getting angry and upset, I'm not sure how this is going to work. I'm not sure how I'm going to handle this myself. So people, they're humans, aren't they? After all, at school, so that might just be part of the features. That's why it's good to sort of start by saying, I'm not here to be angry. I'm not here to have a go. I just want to try and work with you to try and sort out. Hopefully, everyone's reminding themselves that they're all on a shared. They've got a shared goal. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And you've got to try and remain as positive and respectful and calm as you can. It might be that's where it is really difficult. I think you can see things are not going as well as they could, especially if you think there's an obvious answer, perhaps.
Yeah. I was wondering whether pace would be like a useful thing, and I'm thinking, well, actually, perhaps not the whole of pace, but that curiosity possibly is a
Yeah.
really good element. In terms of if you think there's a really obvious answer to all of this, we could phrase it as, "Why are you not doing this?" Or we could say, "Oh, well, I wonder if it would be possible too." And then you're putting it out there, but in a way that's going to be met with either them saying, "Gosh, that's a really good solution. I hadn't thought of that." Or, "Well, in an ideal world, we would like to, but the reasons we're not able to are." And, you know, perhaps using the C, that curiosity, in a paceful way, can help move conversations along.
It is.
That's a
There's a
great
lot of
idea.
parallels really between what we're saying in terms of working with school and what we say to our adoptive parents. So you're never going to affect any change unless you really build that connection to start with, and how it's important to be curious and to accept different perspectives and have
Mm.
empathy. There's a lot of parallels because
Really, yeah.
at the heart of it is relationships, I guess.
Yeah.
Completely, absolutely. It is, and it's such a good point. Actually, I never thought about pace as an option, but it's so true. So true. The more I think about it, and because after all, we're just dealing with human beings with emotions.
We can walk into a meeting and we can say, "You know nothing about adoption related issues. How you are working in your classroom is shaming my child, and that is why they're really struggling. You are rubbish at your job." We could say that, or we could say something on the lines of, "I wonder if you have had any experience of working with adopted children before. My adoption agency has some literature they can send to you. Would that be helpful if perhaps we could explore some of those topics together?" It's a different way of making the same point, but remembering that, well, what was my key goal was I wanted to work with them to support my daughter. Which one of those approaches is going to have the better outcome?
Yeah,
So that's my
yeah, yeah. There's just ways of wording things, aren't there? I think that work.
yeah.
I mean, if you think, and it's probably quite helpful sometimes to acknowledge the things that are going well. If you feel genuinely that they are doing some things that support your child, making adjustments, and you think, well, I really appreciate the fact that they're doing those things. Just don't forget to remind them that you do.
Yeah.
It's a learning experience for everybody. We're all working it out as we go because every child's different and every situation is different, no matter how experienced you are. So, we're assuming in this conversation, of course, that the school is reasonably trying to do all the right things, and of course they will be.
Yeah, I think we'll move on to that in a bit. But yeah, assuming for now the school is kind of on board and wanting to do well.
So the don'ts, as I said, like don't get too personal. If you feel your emotions are rising, and for example, you perhaps haven't got someone with you, you may just think it's okay to say, "Can I just have a few minutes to step out? I just want to take a few minutes to breathe and gather my thoughts together." You're not having a stomp out of the or flouncing out of the room in a huff. It's not that kind of thing. It's just saying, just like with a child, isn't it? You're recognizing your emotions are building. You're beginning. If I don't move soon and move myself out of the situation, I might end up saying things I don't want. I might regret. So if you're feeling that strongly, it's okay. Just take a few moments to step away.
I'd also say on my list of do's is to listen to them. And again, I'm thinking of myself here, but I was ready, all guns blazing. All guns blazing. I was going to be nice, but I was on it. I'd got my script. I knew exactly how this meeting was going to go, and actually they started it a little bit defensively, but they were telling me actually what they'd noticed and what they'd started to put in place, which were things I didn't even know about. And they were also saying what other options were available within the school. And it actually took a lot of the wind out of my sails because I thought, "Oh, okay, you agree with me that there's a concern here. Oh, you're already trying to do things. Okay. Oh, and so I'd gone in thinking that I was going to dictate it. And in actual fact, what they told me initially made me think, well, now I'm more aware of what's available. So I will let you implement what you want to implement first, and then we'll follow it up and see if it's worked. And so my script is still waiting for the next meeting, just in case it doesn't work. But it's worth hearing their side.
What can we do if we feel that the conversation hasn't helped or it hasn't reached the outcome we'd hoped for? Now, Lisa, I know that you just spoke about going into a meeting and agreeing on what's happening next or what you're going to do if you're not happy with the outcome. So that's great as a starting point. If we haven't done that, say before, what do we do if it hasn't gone well?
The first thing I would say is if you haven't agreed a follow up, then it's probably best to have that follow up with the same teacher or the same member of staff, to kind of get back on the same page and give the working relationship a chance. If that person has not done what they have said they were going to do, or perhaps you've come away from a meeting feeling like I wasn't listened to at all, my views have not been taken on board, and I have zero confidence that anything's going to change, then personally I would recommend following the hierarchy within the school. And the reason I say the hierarchy is, so I'm thinking secondary schools here, a lot of the meetings I had were as a maths teacher. So perhaps if working with the maths teacher hadn't worked, you might then consider talking to their head of department. I wouldn't have expected anyone to go straight to the head or straight to the governors. I would have expected it to stay kind of within that. Perhaps if it's something you've been doing with a form tutor, then perhaps their head of year, their pastoral leader, might be someone that you might want to follow it up with. Because, we have assumed that the school are going to be eager to engage, but I am not naive enough to think that every parent who's ever walked into a meeting has come out of it and thought, wow, that went really well. I have the absolute sometimes we will walk in and think, yeah, that's yeah, this
I
is
would
now
agree.
worse. So you would
Yeah,
agree, Jason, yeah?
yeah. I think follow the hierarchy in a primary setting. Of course, it's a little different. Some schools are big; they've got a bigger team, so there might be a phase, like say a phase leader who's in charge of say key stage 1 or key stage 2. Senko might be someone you could speak to if it depends on who you started speaking to. If you find though, whatever's happened, I think reflect a little bit before you go back in or respond in some way. And I would be again doing something in writing at this stage because apart from anything else, it enables you to put your thoughts down clearly. And then next day, I think it's important that we have a discussion with. I want a discussion with, let's say, the head teacher. It would be good at this stage to look at the school's complaints policy, not because you're just going straight to the top again, but because you've already kind of started on that little escalator anyway. You taken a step onto it because they'll always have an informal step, and then you probably find that you're already in there somewhere because you've had a meeting with the teacher. Perhaps you think, well, I've already done that phase. I'm already on to the next stage, so I'm with my rights to go to the next step along. And it may be that you actually are having to include a formal complaint, and don't worry too much about that. It sounds like you're pressing a nuclear button or something. You're not. It's something that can be important to do if you have to, because apart from anything else, it will set off a series of events and a time scale. The school will have to investigate and get back to you within a certain time. So you know that will trigger a certain process. Now, I know people don't really want to go there, and I'm not saying you should just be threatening it and all the rest of it, but it can be appropriate. It can be appropriate. It can be useful for both the school and the parent. I do remember on a couple of occasions, not very often, but when I had a parent who was getting disgruntled about a situation in my school, I did say, I think what you need to do is put a formal complaint in, which they probably thought, well, why would you be saying that? Why would you want me to complain? I said, it's not because you're complaining about me per se, but I want you to put this in writing so I can then put into place a proper investigation. We can track it all. We can put it in writing. We can really establish the truth about what's been actually going on here. And if there's something that we've not done right, I can be clear about what it is we need to do and make any apologies. So sometimes school might not necessarily worry too much about it. If that's not working, you can go to the governors, but they wouldn't even consider it unless it's already gone through a formal complaints process.
I think one of the reasons I think it's good to kind of follow that hierarchy is because, again, returning to the fact that we want a good working relationship with these people and we want them to support our child properly, whilst it's perfectly okay to be putting a formal complaint in if we can build relationships whilst we're escalating these conversations. That is beneficial to everyone. And I certainly, in my role as a head of department, I certainly had experience of parents meeting with a teacher alone and then coming to me. And my next step, if I was able to, would be for us to have a meeting where there was the head of department, the teacher, and the parent.
Hmm.
So actually, so I could act as a mediator and try and make sure that the two parties were trying, if possible, to work together to try and kind of get them to meet on the same page.
Yeah.
So if you do think that you do need to escalate at the hierarchy a little bit and somebody comes back with that type of response, it is definitely worth considering, because actually having that additional person in the room can reduce everyone's threat levels and maybe make a non-meaningful conversation the first time round turn into actually a really good conversation the second time
Hmm.
round, where everyone can move forward and it hasn't gone too far. But I mean, I do echo Jason completely that if it's not a problem to go higher up. But if those steps in between are suggested, they can be a
Yeah.
really good idea.
Yeah, and you don't want to be rupturing relationships really. You want to be trying to forge them and build on them. And it is a professional relationship, so it's got to remain like that, hasn't it? So it's difficult. You just got to acknowledge it's difficult, and everyone says it's difficult in some ways, but it's messy, it's emotional, it's not easy for you as a parent, and sometimes for the staff, depending on the situation itself.
The other thing I was just thinking that is quite unique to school environments is we don't know what's going to happen in the future, and actually our child could come across this person again.
Mm.
And so certainly I know in a secondary school, maybe they're the maths teacher in year 7, and then you move into year 8 and you think, oh, it's not a problem anymore. But then they come back again in year 9 and you're thinking, oh, we're back to square one again. But also in primary schools, I know that 1 year teachers may teach, I don't know, year 1, and then next year they might teach year 3, for
Yeah,
example. And
yeah.
so again, it's just worth, if possible, not burning bridges, because we might find that 4 years down the line, we've got to try and have a working relationship with that same person again.
Mm.
So yeah, if at all possible, don't burn those bridges. But in some cases, you do need to stand firm.
As we were talking about that, that was reminding me of something I think we've said before, probably in another podcast. But if you're feeling a bit disgruntled about a particular member of staff or something that's something that's happened or not been done properly, really be careful what you say in front of your child, because if you start venting in front of them about individual members of staff or the school itself, in that moment, it kind of undermines things. They will get that message that this place is not doing a good job. It can be just a little bit destabilizing for them. So it's really tricky, isn't it? Because you've got to try and put on a front again, some form of words that might be helpful, but try not to do that. You might, even if you feel like that personally, it doesn't really help.
I've also seen situations where, because there had been that type of conversation in front of the child at home, children will come into school and then actively sabotage
Mm-hmm.
the
Yes,
support that was
exactly.
trying to be put in place. And of course, I wouldn't blame the child for that, because they're just responding to kind of the situation that's around them. But again, that's not going to help, because they won't be wanting to access the support that's on
Mm-hmm.
offer from people who they've been told are not great. So
Yeah,
it's again that idea that actually we all need to be working together.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. There's a world of difference, isn't there, between member of staff who might have made a mistake or a member of staff who maybe hasn't got the attitude that you might want them to have
yeah.
towards your child. But so yeah, genuine mistakes and perhaps things that need to develop awareness of. You definitely don't want to sabotage that, because the member of staff might be really genuinely invested in trying to help your child to do well, and so yeah, that would have just undermined it. I suppose the only other nuclear, when I say about nuclear button, actually the actual nuclear button really is to say, is this school the right place for my child?
Yeah.
But let's hope we've not got to that stage. Let's really hope we've not.
I think that would need to be a whole other podcast, because,
Yes.
hopefully these tips and this little exploration will help the conversations go well. So that
Well,
will not
90
need,
percent of the time they do. That's the thing. In
yeah,
reality, if I think about all the meetings I've been part of in any role as a member of staff, as a foster parent, and so on, and supporting other parents and families through this role, 99% of the time it work. The meetings are productive and work, and you often find you have to come back and meet again and come back and meet again, and you just have this gradual process of learning together.
I'd echo that as well. In my experience across different roles and as a parent, the vast, vast, vast majority of them are successful.
Good to end on a positive.
Yeah.
Because it's true. True.
Well, thank you, Jason and Lisa, as ever. We really hope that this episode has given you some ideas on how to approach and manage conversations with school. But again, please remember that our post-adoption support team is always available to help. We would love to hear from you with questions about any of the topics covered so far or anything we're yet to discuss. So please email us with any questions, suggestions, or experiences that you'd like to share. You can email us at education@adoption-focus.org.uk.